This is AUGforums.com Real Talk. First, thank you to our sponsors, APS Payments, DataSelf, and Velixo. Please take a minute to support this podcast by clicking each one of the sponsor banners located at augforums.com/sponsors. Every click helps to support this podcast. My name is Tim Rodman, and I'm coming to you live on Tuesday, June 15th, 2021. This is episode number 46, Consulting with Acumatica Remotely with Alan Conroy. Alan, thanks for coming on today, and I'll let you go ahead and introduce yourself.
Thank you very much, Tim. So I'm a Acumatica consultant for ProServe, who are based out of Buffalo in New York. But personally, myself, I'm based out of Dublin in Ireland. And I'm a recent joinee of the ProServe team. The ProServe team actually have quite a few. The ProServe team actually have quite a few distributed-based employees around continental US, in New York, obviously in Buffalo area, and Philly, Philadelphia, Florida, and then we have colleagues in Ireland and Canada and Guatemala. So I'm consulting in ERP for about 25 years. My initial college major was in marketing, and my plan was to go off and market Coca-Cola or Kellogg's cornflakes or something like that. I was never intended to get involved in ERP software. Yeah, here I am.
I think that's funny. I wonder what percentage of people in college actually knew what ERP software was. I know I didn't.
I just presumed it was accounts. ERP was just accounts. And as part of the course curriculum, we had to do accounting. And it was never really my favorite part of it. But the college course really launched me into the industry by accident, because one of the parts of that course was to give us 6 months work placement with a company, and I worked for 6 months in the third year of that course with this office supplies company, as it was then. And when I left college, they offered me a job afterwards to work in their marketing team. But then I ended up pivoting into the IT section, as they had no IT capacity at the time. And then an ERP system was on the horizon. So I got made accidental project manager in the UK. But 300 office supplies companies used this system. It was all text driven, as systems were back in the mid-90s.
That's interesting. So even your schooling, you grew up in Ireland as well, I assume? Always been there?
That's right, yeah. Grew up in Ireland and went to college in Ireland.
And so that accidental project manager role, that was the turning point that hooked you into ERP, and you haven't looked back since, or have you kind of gone in and out of working with ERP systems?
So I've stayed working with ERP systems since. So initially, when I did the course, as I said, I planned to do marketing. And when I joined the company, I joined their marketing team, and then they stuck me in the warehouse with a brush. And they start getting me to do various jobs around the business. And initially, I'll be honest, I was a bit disgruntled about it. But actually, it was very good grounding to give me exposure to every layer of the business. So I understood the warehouse. Initially, I'll be honest, I was a bit disgruntled about it. But actually, it was very good grounding to give me exposure to every layer of the business. So I understood the warehouse distribution operation. I understood the warehouse environment. I moved into the account. I understood the account, the AP and AR end of things. So then by the time the ERP implementation was coming along, I probably was one of the few people who had a broad overview of how all of the divisions in the business operated.
Very interesting. Yeah, it's hard to find people who can do both the depth of the technical knowledge needed to understand how things are going to happen in the ERP system, but then also have the breadth of business knowledge, right? So it sounds like you found yourself in that unique position, and hopefully that turned out well for you financially. But For sure, it sounds like you enjoyed the type of work. Would you say that you even found you enjoyed it more than marketing, and that's why you haven't looked turned out well for you financially? But for sure, it sounds like you enjoyed the type of work. Would you say that you even found you enjoyed it more than marketing, and that's why you haven't looked back?
Very much so. So from there, like once I had installed that system, the company who were based in the UK at the time didn't have a presence in Ireland, and at the time, they had to send people from the middle of the UK around the Manchester area over to Ireland and travel around Ireland. So it was prohibitively expensive for them as well. So what they did was they approached me to act as a contractor for them initially, so that I would go to other jobs and I would install the ERP system. So they had a guy who was selling the system, and his job at the same time was also implementing it. But he was less focused on implementation because it was more rewarding to sell.
Where you first got into
Yeah.
ERP, and then now are you talking about your next job at Deals Morton Group?
That's right. That was a very troublesome installation for the ledger line software people. So they actually got me a job in there, and then from that, there's a little gap in the LinkedIn profile there where I worked for that company directly. But they happened to be acquired when I was about 4 or 5 months into joining the organisation full time after I left the Deals Morton organisation, which was another office supplies dealer. They were acquired by what was an Irish company actually, which was unusual for normally it was UK companies would buy Irish companies because the UK market is just so much bigger. But this was a takeover going the other way, and the Irish company decided they had two strategies really. One was into joining the organisation full time after I left the Deals Morton organisation, which was another office supplies dealer. They were acquired by what was an Irish company actually, which was unusual for normally it was UK companies would buy Irish companies because the UK market is just so much bigger. But this was a takeover going the other way, and the Irish company decided they had two strategies really. One was they wanted to acquire the customer base, which was 300 odd customers, and they wanted to replace the text-based system with a GUI-based system. And when they took over, they had their GUI, they had their team, and they saw no need for me. So I ended up being made redundant. In effect, the position was gone once the acquisition went through. So I did a bit of I did a bit of consultancy for a while, just ad hoc consultancy. Um, and then that Irish company announced an end of life for the for the for the text-based system, the ledger domain system. But they didn't they they weren't in a position to roll out that GUI-based system as quick as they would like. And they issued the end of life and kind of gave customers an ultimatum: you're not getting any support, which really was an unusual position to take. You weren't getting any support on the legacy system. You had to move to the new system. And it was quite a high pressure sale. And on the back of that, I fielded numerous inquiries from Ireland and the UK. And I ended up setting up a support business for the legacy software where we captured about a third of the market. So about 100 of those 300 UK and Irish office supply companies were
End of life with their customers, but they killed their partner channel, and that that didn't go over well. I'm curious your thoughts on how that end of life strategy worked with their customers. In my experience, as hard as you try to kill an ERP product, it's very difficult to kill it. And if you try to do it intentionally, especially as the software company, you can really not look good in front of your customers. How do you think that worked out for them?
it worked out very poorly, really, because first of all, they lost within a couple of months a third of their customer base. And I found it unusual because it was a very stable customer base. The product was very stable. It had been written in 1992, so this was 2001. So it was quite stable at that point. Um, and when I initially said this, I kind of gave myself a life a life expectancy of 5 years. So 2006, I kind of thought, this is how long this is. I kind of gave myself a life expectancy of 5 years. So 2006, I kind of thought, this is how long this software will last in the market because of technology changes and so on. The last customer to migrate off that platform was in 2017. And they were the last customer that I supported on that legacy. So they had bought that system 22 years previously. And from a revenue point of view, obviously from my point of view, they were a very easy customer to sell, to support, and they paid a monthly revenue. Because we decided to at 1.10 charging by the month, the way that kind of SaaS subscriptions were going. So I don't understand the policy. I understand the policy of needing to sunset your software, but I don't understand the policy of doing it very hard at end of life. The competitors also popped up over the carpet to kind of drag some of their customers, get their customers as well. So by doing it in a very, hard manner, people say, especially if they've been on software 10, 15 years, they're happy with the software. If you tell them you have to move now to our new product, they'll go, I'll see what else is out in the market. If I have to move, I'll look around and see what else is there.
I've seen the same thing. The stick doesn't work very well with ERP. The carrot works sometimes, but yeah, forcing someone to move off of a back office system, not a good move. But it looks like you still made that last quite a while. You got about 15 years listed there working with that product.
So with that, I had identified then that, I kind of thought 2005, 2006 was
years listed there working with that product.
So with that, I had identified then that, I kind of thought 2005, 2006 was kind of the life cycle for the vast majority of people using that software. So I was approached then because of the size of the customer base that I had. Office supplies is quite a niche market. And I was approached by another company then to become their VAR in Ireland. So they had identified UK customers that they wanted to target, and we came to an agreement where we would, in effect, sell. We would act as a conduit for them to sell into the UK market through our customers, and then we would migrate our customers. But it was a very much a carrot migration to this new GUI-based software UK market through our customers, and then we would migrate our customers. But it was a very much a carrot migration to this new GUI-based software. So that started in 2006. It went fairly well till about 2010, when there was a severe economic contraction in Ireland. So Ireland, I don't know if you know the history of it. Ireland had a banking bust, and we had to get the IMF in to bail out our banks and the European Union. So that led to a massive contraction in the Irish market. And office supplies is one of these markets where, like advertising, it's one of the first things on the overhead to go. You don't need a new desk. You don't need a new. One of the problems we faced was our customers were either closing or they were downscaling, and one of our costs were an issue for them. So that's where I suppose that was where my first look at remote work came in.
And so that was the crash happened 2010, but you still stayed working with that office product software. Say the name again, Ledger Domain.
So Ledger Domain was the previous legacy system. The new GUI-based system was a system called Horizon.
Okay, but it was the same company that owned both. That's why they were promoting the move.
No, the Ledger. Not quite. So Legerdemain was written by a guy, and the guy who wrote the new GUI-based software, he left the company after the acquisition and set up himself. No, not quite. So Legerdemain was written by a guy, and the guy who wrote the new GUI-based software, he left the company after the acquisition and set up himself and started writing the software. And we came to an agreement with him that we had customers in the UK that we couldn't install. We couldn't travel over to the UK and install just again over cost. And they didn't want to come to Ireland. So we found a good synergy there that they could market to our customers in the UK and we would market their product in Ireland.
And it was still, though, an office products focused industry.
Correct. Yeah.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
So you went office products all the way from 1996 up to 2017. And then you've got around 2017. I think the name's funny to me. It's Intact, but it's INTACT. In the US, Sage NET. I don't think it's the same one. But interesting name there. Is that also an office product based solution?
No, it's very much a general distribution industry. And I've done, when I was working with those folks, I've done stuff like chocolate factory, put a production system into a chocolate factory, to a builder's merchant, to electrical distributors. So it's the complete, any kind of distribution of production business, it worked with, but it's an on-premise. It's an on-premise solution. I do think they will run into. I know that they're running into issues now because Sage have bought the American Intact, as we called it, and the naming between the two companies is going to cause a lot of consternation there. I think they probably end up having to rebrand.
Yeah, it was the office product industry for 20 years or so, and then all of a sudden you go into distribution, what I would say manufacturing as well. Well, that sounds like quite a rush of knowledge you had getting thrown at you. How'd that go for you?
It wasn't too bad. Like in terms of, you've got the logistics really is the same. It was where the office supply stuff was just more niche in terms of product information systems, catalog, EDI type transactions, specialist e-commerce providers rather than Shopify and stuff like that. But the base, the core of distribution is relatively the same through a lot of markets. A lot of companies have the same core business activities with their own business nuance on top of that.
That's a good point about how, and I guess, that
core of distribution is relatively the same through a lot of markets. A lot of companies have the same core business activities with their own business nuance on top of that.
That's a good point about how, and I guess, that point right there is a big reason why mid-market ERP systems are so, well, especially Acumatica, are so industry independent, because that core really is 80% the same or so across so many different industries.
Yeah, and Acumatica is quite customizable. And the previous product that I worked, the Intact product that I worked on, also is quite customizable as well. It used the same kind of customization project methodology that Acumatica used. So it allows you to kind of, you can add in modules without affecting the particular market need, and then makes you very sticky in those particular markets then, because when another company tries to come in and leverage your customers away, because you have that market knowledge, because you have that customization developed for that market, it makes it very hard or expensive for other companies to come in and just target that. And that's why I suppose I lasted so long in the office supplies industry, was that other companies kind of came, had a look at the market, thought, yeah, we'd be interested in that, including Intact actually, who I went on to work for, came in about 2008, and they dipped their toe in the market and got out again fairly quick, because the incumbents, which I was one of them, were just too large in the market to make it pay for them. So I think if you can find a specialist market and build into them, were just too large in the market to make it pay for them. So I think if you can find a specialist market and build into that market, you can do quite well.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point about the advantage of that. And I see advantages on both sides in that I like how Acumatica is so horizontal and how they focus on the technology, right? And that's what I want them to be doing. But then, companies don't just buy technology, they buy full-on solutions. And so you've got now the various Acumatica editions, which are really a marketing and sales thing, right? It's the same product. And then like to your point, VARs can build their own solutions for micro niche industries that they want to focus on. And I really like that angle of it because of the power of the Acumatica platform and the ability to create customizations that are first-class citizens in the product. I think that's a really strong point about Acumatica, and the fact that they sell only through their VAR channel. They really lean on their VARs to do that. So it's a symbiotic relationship, in my opinion. Both sides need each other. They know what they do well. Acumatica focuses on the tech. The VARs focus on bringing it to the various industries. I think it's a cool business model, and I hope they keep up staying in their respective areas of expertise.
Yeah, I think that's one of the key challenges for VAR is, does the parent company compete with you in the market? And I think it's a very good thing for an Acumatica VAR to be able to say that they don't compete with Acumatica, I should say, directly. It's that they can then find these particular channels that suit their business or even their geographical location, that they can pick out specific markets and target that market and do quite well in that. And that Acumatica, I suppose, leave them alone in that. Because the VAR market, I think, is going to be tough. Like having been a VAR, it's a tough market to be in at times. And I think, you might see the growth of specialty VARs over the coming years, or I don't know whether consolidation of VARs as well, as the kind of technology changes.
So you were at Intact with 1C for about 4 years and recently pivoted into Acumatica. And what were some of your reasons why? Was it that legacy technology versus modern cloud technology? Was it the VAR point that you just mentioned, that the business model is selling exclusively through VARs? What were some of the reasons why you got into Acumatica?
So really, I knew that the future of any software really was on the cloud, and the vast majority of applications that businesses are using at the moment are cloud-based. Whereas ERP, for some reason, or accounts-based systems seem to be stuck in a lot of them seem to be stuck on it with an on-premise mindset. And what attracted me with Acumatica was that it was cloud-based and that it had the customization. A few years ago, I went back to college to do a web technologies course to learn to learn code. And never really the goal there was never really to learn, to be a developer. But the thing was to understand, when I talked to developers, what they meant. Because sometimes developers live in they have their own language, and anyone you're a developer, they like to bamboozle people who don't understand the language. So I felt it was important for me to understand that language. And when the financial crash hit in Ireland, one of the things we did was we immediately pivoted away from on-premise, including our offices. We, to save on overhead, we closed our offices nearly immediately. And we closed our offices nearly immediately. We gave because we wanted to save the headcount, which had gone on to be massively successful. All of the other products that we tend to use in organizations are cloud-based in terms of Office 365, various packages, people who are on G Suite and so on. And that's the way everything's transitioning towards cloud-based software. And the ERP isn't, or at least it isn't at the same pace that the rest of the consumer products are. So back in, I suppose, when the crash hit in Ireland, one of the things that I looked at was how could we pivot away from having a permanent base? Did we need a particular permanent base? So I was an early adopter of cloud technology in terms of, we were one of Zendesk, which is the help desk support system. We were one of their first customers. Early adopter of cloud technology in terms of, we were one of Zendesk, which is the help desk support system. We were one of their first customers. We removed all our phone lines and replaced them with voice over IP lines. All our staff worked from home as opposed to having to come to the office. But really, it started off about 2010, 2011. I myself moved from Ireland to Portugal for a couple of years because when I was working from home, I decided home could be anywhere. And the technology that we leveraged then allowed me to do that. So even though we were supporting an on-premise system, we invested in things like Log Me In, Rescue, which allowed us to dial into servers and connect to the servers. And it meant it could be done from anywhere. So that's what attracted me when the Intax company that I worked for, a very good company to work for, very nice people, but the technology was still very much on premise, or delivering, a cloud, I'm going to say inverted commas, cloud package, which was remote app via Windows remote app application. So it wasn't true cloud that Acumatica is.
So it sounds like that cloud was the big motivator for you. And when you went out to go do that search, did you look at NetSuite? What other cloud ERP options did you look at? And I'm curious how you even heard about Acumatica. They're not very big in the UK and Ireland area currently, although they've recently started to make some more traction there. So how'd that search go?
It is so much better than Acumatica. So anytime I see a company put out a piece of documentation like that, I always take it with a pinch of salt in terms of, because it's generated by the marketing department, but it also gives you a good view as to who they are worried about. So if NetSuite were deliberately targeting Acumatica as a product to say, oh, we're much better than this product, and here are the reasons why we're much better at this product, they had a reason to be worried.
That's hilarious. So you heard about Acumatica from NetSuite.
So partly, yeah. I was introduced to Chris Cleary last year, who's the CEO of ProServe. And Chris is a very nice chap, and he's listening in, I'm sure he'll be listening in. So he's a very pervasive chap, and he has a good vision of where he has a good vision of where he wants to take his business and the organization, and how he wants to use Acumatica, and how he wants to drive his business forward, and how he wants to drive his business forward as an Acumatica VAR. And I felt that I could offer, having been through the VAR channel myself, having exposure to different areas, of business, in Ireland and elsewhere, that I had something to offer.
And when was that you made the switch to Chris Cleary and ProServe working there? How
Very
recent was that?
recently. It was last month.
Just last month.
Recent.
So still
Yeah.
like on the tail end. So, I'm curious the remote part of your aspect now. It sounds like you embraced cloud a while ago, asked all the time. Do you have anyone with Acumatica experience that you could recommend for whatever position? And my response is always, why confine yourself to someone with Acumatica experience? That pool of people is going to be very small, right? Why not just find someone who has good ERP experience? And so you've got that, and that's the majority of it. Now you're just going to get the Acumatica knowledge to sprinkle on top of it. So it's a new Acumatica thing for you, but you've got the skills already in place, right? And so you did the cloud, you've now getting into Acumatica, and the remote part of that, you being in Ireland, have you even traveled over to Buffalo, or how'd you do the interview? How'd you sign up with that company? What was the remote angle like to that?
It's all been done through Zoom, and I haven't physically met any of my stateside colleagues other than see their videos through Zoom because um, at the moment, just the current COVID restrictions, the US prevents anybody from flying into, or they're very, very restrictive on who can fly into the US at the moment. Um, so we had talked a couple of months ago, and I think COVID has been a catalyst for a lot of organizations to, we've seen the growth in Acumatica customers alone that has allowed, because of COVID. We're factoring it down to COVID. Um, and I think, the pool of resources of people who are qualified or who have experience with ERP system in any particular market is quite shallow. And I think, you know, I don't understand why organizations would necessarily limit themselves to geography of their own. I don't understand why organizations would necessarily limit themselves to geography of their own location. And, I can appreciate people will think that, there's a 5 hour time difference between Ireland and the east coast of the US. But while that has its challenges, it also has its advantages. So, for argument's sake, if I want to work on customization projects, I can do those in the morning in Irish time, which is about 4 or 5 a.m. US time. So I can publish customization projects, and I know that I'm not going to interfere with any operational aspect of the customer at the other end. And I think more and more companies now are basing, who thought they could never be remote, are now starting to say they can be remote, or at least at a worst, they can be hybrid companies.
So is this the first job that you've ever taken where you
Unusual
I've done that
experience.
once before, but it was pre-COVID. I did the same thing. And I just thought, the way the world is going, it's going to happen at some point. So why not now? But it is an unusual experience. I agree.
But I think all organizations should look at in a way, the global talent pool. And do they have, like there's challenges for me in terms of dealing with US companies. US tax is an unusual beast for me. Like in Ireland, we have what we call VAT. So we take the price of a product and we stick, unfortunately, 23% on top of it as a tax, which would be equivalent maybe to a state tax in the US. But it's, there's different types of taxes, so there's, when I knew that I was going to be moving to ProServe, I started to, first of all, research Acumatica as a product and understand its basic operations, and then the kind of industry specifics in the US in terms of tax and things like that.
Well, I really like your point specifically about advantages, things like customizations, and especially with all the low code, no code stuff that Acumatica is continuing to introduce more and more into customization projects. People like us who aren't full blown developers are getting involved with customization projects a lot more frequently. And a big disadvantage is you've got to publish them after hours. So I agree with you there. You got a huge advantage there. And I'm sure syncing up for meetings is more challenging, but it's not all challenges. And I like your point too about accessing the global talent pool and you've got a different perspective on things. The tax maybe is more of a challenging, different perspective, but you've got other areas, but it's not all challenges. And I like your point too about accessing the global talent pool, and you've got a different perspective on things. The tax maybe is more of a challenging, different perspective, but you've got other areas, I'm sure, that you're more comfortable with multi-currency, and there's other areas that I'm sure you bring to the table, and just having a different way of looking at things. I think that's really cool.
Yeah, I think it allows also if you access more employees outside of your geographical area, it allows you then to access different markets because you're tapping into the pool. So if, for argument's sake, ProServe wanted to investigate the Irish, UK, European market, they have resource in the market who understand the market rather than just staying within their tri-state areas, and that what they say of that neck of the wood. Some companies will resist that, and that's fine. It comes down to how you can build a company culture, but I think it can be done remotely, and I think the COVID accelerant has helped that.
And I think another interesting point about it is that if you really want to embrace the remote work that is happening, whether we like it or not, and it's happening with your clients, you've got to embrace it internally as well, right? And it's hard if a VAR has an in the office culture, and then they're trying to work with clients remotely. So your experience of not even meeting anyone yet is the experience of a lot of new clients under COVID, right? So I think that's an advantage too of forcing yourself to embrace work internally as a consultancy organization. And
and stuff like that, and that does give you, that does have its advantages as well. Give you an overall feel of how the organization runs. But once you get over that end of it, the remote aspect of it allows you to focus on specific tasks and to be much more focused with your time, and then allows you to kind of go between clients. That you can service multiple clients really within a day. Whereas if you're traveling on site, depending on how far you have to travel, you may have to travel for an hour, 2 hours in the morning, do your on-site presence all day, and then travel 2 hours home. You've just serviced one particular client at that point.
yeah, I found the same thing, but especially for a typical Acumatica implementation, you definitely need to make that visit once to see the place and meet the people. But after that, I found the same thing. You're more focused if you if you don't have to kill all that travel time all the time. And if it is a situation where you really need there to be there to crack the whip on the client to get them to do their homework and their end of things, well, that's not really your role most of the time. You really they need someone in their organization who's doing something, who's doing that, right? And so by not being on site, that saves you from maybe getting tempted to play that role and blowing the budget. So, I found the same thing. You go on site once, and maybe you go on site again at Go Live, but it's not like you need to be there all the time.
I think then as well that the processes that you put in place to deliver projects remotely is key, and it takes a quite a different mind shift away from the way that you might especially how I would have implemented projects previously.
Time.
I think then as well that the processes that you put in place to deliver projects remotely is key. And it takes a quite a different mind shift away from the way that you might especially how I would have implemented projects previously. Like my last few projects that I've implemented have been prior to joining ProServe have been delivered remotely. Because of COVID. So that, and it changes then how you focus that, because you can't be beside someone and showing them all the time to try and get them to do it. It's much more milestone based, key tasks, milestones. which a lot of people will do as a broad, in a broad scope, but you become you really comes down to micro tasks at some point when you're implementing remotely.
And you being a cloud pioneer, especially one of the first Zendesk customers, that's pretty interesting. So being someone who's not afraid to research new tools, even finding out about Acumatica, what are some of the tools that you found personally, and not just the software tools, but just general techniques that you found from a project management side, getting to the finish line on an implementation and doing it remotely? Any thoughts on specific software tools or just general techniques?
Um, one of the tools that we use is Monday.com, which it's fairly new to ProServe. And I kind of, even though it was a project, implementation project, I kind of like to do a sprint cycle, the same way that the development guys would do a sprint cycle, um, to try and continue that agile scrum kind of methodology to kind of keep the momentum going through a project. So really that kind of, I don't know if you've used that, the Agile Scrum stuff, but it actually is a very good way to kind of break everything down into small little chunks and just keep that forward momentum in a project.
I have used Trello. My favorite thing about it is how easy it is to drag the cards around, from open to completed or whatever categories you use. I do like
Yeah.
that. Monday.com sounds interesting. I've seen a lot of press on them recently. I think they even went public recently. They're well funded. The most interesting thing that I've seen, and I think I'm understanding it correctly, but it looks like you can actually put your meeting recordings. I think I'm understanding it correctly, but it looks like you can actually put your meeting recordings in there, including notes and transcriptions. Have you played with that feature yet?
We've started to do that, yes. So we have all our meetings recorded through it, which is sometimes if you can't make a meeting, it's obviously really handy. You can just dial back in, or somebody can kind of tell you to, net on the meeting or listen back at the meeting at minute 36 onward. And it just kind of cuts down. So if you need to refer something to another client or a colleague, I should say, you have that ability. The transcription stuff we haven't used so much, but there's some nice apps in that they connect into it, for agendas and so on. And that's another thing that I liked about Acumatica was the level of integration and the marketplace. The idea behind the marketplace that they would was the level of integration and the marketplace. The idea behind the marketplace that they would let people build customizations for their product and then just figure it out like that. There's an awful lot of ERP guys' systems tend to be a very closed ecosystem, and they want to control everything from all aspects of it, from reporting to e-commerce to the ERP system itself. And I liked the openness with Acumatica that they allowed, various ISVs integrate with them.
I feel like I need to start taking tallies for how many times I hear someone say, I like the openness of Acumatica. I hear that frequently. And it's hard to even put your finger on what exactly that is. So you're mentioning it with the marketplace, but I've heard it from different angles. But that word open seems to come up.
Yeah, one of the things I did was I actually took an open source piece of software called Spree e-commerce, and I designed an e-commerce system from that. It's written on Ruby on Rails. And I suppose I always like that open source. I appreciate Acumatica isn't quite open source, but it has the same kind of root that it allow you, within certain parameters, build Acumatica the way that you want to build it.
So you've been rolling up your sleeves and actually coding some stuff, huh?
Not within Acumatica. I did a bit of C Sharp. I preferred Ruby on Rails to C Sharp, to be honest. And having now encountered Acumatica, I wish I had paid more attention to C Sharp. So I do, but I really do kind of just did the coding aspect just to understand it as opposed to being a full-time developer.
Interesting. Same for me. Yeah, I find I do the same thing. I like seeing the code even a lot of times just to get an idea of what's going on, but it's more of an architecture role or a knowing what's possible type of a role, and then handing it off to a developer to actually write the code.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting to see the growth of Acumatica. The customer number growth has obviously been another interesting thing to see, that that they've grown the customer base quite considerably in the last couple of months, and the move over, I suppose, to this side of the world with, I think it's Pinnacle, who's their UK VAR, who have a presence, I think, in Northern Ireland. So it's interesting to see how they're going to address the market. To be honest, I haven't listened to some of the previous podcasts. I was interested to hear how they partnered with MYOB in Australia and the company in Germany whose name now escapes me.
Lexware.
Yeah. And it's again, it's a mentality. I dread to say, because venture capitalists are now involved. Will they still maintain that particular trajectory, or will there be a different trajectory for them now? But from what I see currently, it's as we said earlier, it's very much an open system.
Yeah, I had the same question. Well, the more the venture capital money is flowing, which it is, and even I wonder if they go public in the next few years.
As we said earlier, it's very much an open system.
Yeah, I had the same question. Well, the more the venture capital money is flowing, which it is, and even I wonder if they go public in the next few years. Of course, open will suffer. The question is how much, right? And we'll just have to wait and see, I guess.
It's really then down to how they treat the channel, in effect. And I suppose the channel will the channel consolidate, or will they focus on specific VARs? Because I suppose you've got the 80-20 rule there with in terms of how much traffic is going through, or how much business is going through VARs. I would assume like the vast majority is going through a select number of VARs, and a lot of VARs have different products. Both are a little bit different in that regard, because they're an Acumatica only business. They do have legacy import fax customers, but they're not actively selling any other ERP system other than Acumatica. Whereas I know some other VARs sell Acumatica and other packages as well.
I've seen the same thing. Yeah, that legacy product becomes a bit of a tar baby for a VAR that's still got that client base that's soaking up resources. They need to support them, and they're trying to fire up Acumatica. That could definitely be a challenge for sure.
Yeah. So I think the VAR channel is important. Like, it ultimately comes down to, do they decide that they want to go direct, or do they want to go direct in specific markets? So if you said to people at the moment in this side of the world, they would say, I've never heard of it. And a lot of people, it's the old adage, no one got fired for buying IBM. So people will stick with the SAPs or the Netsuites and stuff like that because it's a comfortable brand name. So I think you would like to see the direction of Acumatica to promote Acumatica as a brand, and allow the VAR channel then to push the product through.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting times. great growth. COVID helped the growth. Acumatica still seems to have a bright future, but yeah, still not one of the major established players yet, right? We're all just along for the ride and hoping it continues to go the way it's been going. And sounds like you liked it enough to jump in to the Acumatica ecosystem. So welcome, and continues to go the way it's been going. And sounds like you liked it enough to jump in to the Acumatica ecosystem. So welcome. And I'm curious on your Acumatica journey so far. If you've got a few more minutes here, if you actually installed it and played with it before signing up with ProServe, like were you able to get your hands on it, or have you just been learning it within the last few weeks, month or so?
No, I've had my hands dirty with it for a while. So I've been getting to understand the process of it. I suppose I gravitate kind of towards the GI and low code, no code customization kind of areas is really where I have a lot of interest in. Um, that, that's kind of the areas that I like. Um, I like there's certain aspects of it that I like. There's kind of areas is really where I have a lot of interest in. Um, that, that's kind of the areas that I like. Um, I like there's certain aspects of it that I like. There's certain aspects of it that I don't like. I think that's the same with any software, but I think there's an awful lot more positives for it. Um, I suppose one of the big downsides for me has been that I've come from an environment where I'm used to database access, and so being able to run a script fairly quickly to resolve an issue is a little bit more, with Acumatica is a little tougher to do.
I hear you there. That was a challenge for me at first as well. Although, one thing I've realized on that, especially running a script to fix something, I've realized that I think I've just gotten used to it. I used to want to get into the database. Then you're punting the liability over to Acumatica.
Yeah, it's part of it really when you start with any new software is that adjustment of how the processes with that particular product. And the customization, I like the customization bit. I do have queries or concerns in terms of that you know customization theme, and I could be completely wrong on this, theme to have to be rewritten or slightly modified when a new release comes out, um, which I think which I always when I saw that, I kind of was worried in terms. I'm not worried, but I was just kind of interested in terms of how people who don't necessarily use an Acumatica partner and they look after themselves or with Acumatica, how do they upgrade challenge or do they stay away from customization? Because I think as a VAR, you have two channels you can go down. You can say, here's the software and make your business fit this software, and you don't customize the software, or you do very, very little customization. Or on the other side, the VAR says, you're in this market, we can customize the software to tailor your market. And from a sales point of view, that's a very strong proposition, rather than trying to tell a company, well, you've got to bend your business process to the way the software works. We're saying we'll bend our software to the way your business process works. So you constantly have to upgrade your customizations every time there's a new release. I just wonder how challenging that is for other organizations who don't have an in-house development presence.
I think I'm thinking as you're talking here that maybe Ryan Brown and I could have you on a live broadcast.
I just wonder how challenging that is for other organizations who don't have an in-house development presence.
I think I'm thinking as you're talking here that maybe Ryan Brown and I could have you on a live broadcast in the future. A few things you said make me think about that. One is Ryan as a customer. I don't know if have you seen any of the live broadcasts that we've been doing?
Yes.
And Ryan went through that experience. So he's a customer, and their initial round of customizations were very SQL heavy. I would call it like old school way of doing it. And they had a lot of pain upgrading. And then they had them all redone. And now their upgrades are pretty smooth. So that's one reason I think you and Ryan would hit it off there. And a couple other things you said. One is you actually installed Acumatica before you even started getting paid for it. I was in the getting paid for it. I was in the same boat. It was like a hobby for me for a few years. So you've got that initiative, that hands-on, I want to figure stuff out drive that both Ryan and I have as well. And then you've also talked about low code, no code a few times, not just with the time zone thing and being able to deploy customization projects easier, but sounds like it's an interest of yours. All that stuff lines up very well with what Ryan and I are interested in, especially that low code, no code. So I don't know, maybe you got some cool stuff that you come up with that we've talked about doing more under the hood type stuff with the new workflow engine, which is that low code, no code stuff. So maybe we can get you on the live broadcast in the future. And I think you and Ryan will hit it off.
Give me a few months to get my feet under the table, but I'd be happy to do so. What I did also enjoy about or find good about Acumatica was the community and hear other people's stories and other people's journeys. I've listened to I think I'm nearly up to date with them now. And it's quite an interesting, there's quite a good share within the community that they're willing to share things. And as I said previously, other systems tend to be a closed house, but you can go onto AUG forums and pull down a GI or a report or something like that and fine tune it then for your own needs, which is quite useful.
That is really cool. I'm picturing you running through the beautiful green hills of Ireland, listening to an Acumatica podcast. That's pretty cool.
Unfortunately, at times I've listed it at 1.5 speed or 2 speed. I'm not looking forward to listening to my own voice at double the speed.
I do the same thing. I always do 2 speed. It sounds, while we're talking, the whole goal on the podcast is hearing people's stories, finding out what you like about Acumatica, what you don't, how you got involved, all the stuff we talked about today. And I like it because it's a way to digest it in smaller pieces. For me, whenever I go to the Acumatica Summit, which I won't make it this year for the first time in several years, but it's such a big event, and I just have a long list of people I want to talk to, and it only comes around once a year. My goal with the podcast is to have more frequent conversations, put them out there publicly for those jogs that you're going on, or those car commutes back to the office eventually that some of us will get back to. And that's great to hear that you're taking advantage of that, and that's exactly the kind of thing I love hearing.
Yeah, I think between the internal Acumatica community
is to have more frequent conversations, put them out there publicly for those jogs that you're going on, or those car commutes back to the office eventually that some of us will get back to. And that's great to hear that you're taking advantage of that, and that's exactly the kind of thing I love hearing.
Yeah, I think between the internal Acumatica community and the AG community, I think it's very important that people share their experiences and share their information. I think it makes the product better in the long term. Like people can look at it in terms of I don't want to talk to VAR X or to talk to VAR Y, but we're both distributing the same product, and we're not the another Acumatica VAR is not our enemy. The enemy is NetSuite. The enemy is SAP. They're the guy. Cannibalizing ourselves. We should be helping each other to promote this product, push it out there to make it as recognizable as those other brand names that are out there at the moment.
I agree. And I've heard another complaint about the open philosophy, which is you don't want to tell people what's not good about Acumatica. But I agree with your point that actually it makes the product better. You want to know if there's something bad that you haven't even realized yet. You want to be hearing from your customers. And it's just the nature these days. You're going to find out anyways. Someone's going to put it out there anyways. So why not embrace that open philosophy if you try to fight it, it's gonna bite you, I think.
I think so. And I think you need to, if you can say that this doesn't work, I think it also then, in terms of with the VAR community helps to agitate the improvement of the product within Acumatica, that we are Acumatica's customers, VARs, and our customers can do with Acumatica. So our customers then become the evangelists for our VARs become the evangelists for Acumatica. Acumatica does very well. I think there's a win-win-win there for everyone if we do it right.
I completely agree. Well, Alan, welcome to the Acumatica ecosystem. Thanks for being willing to come on and really embracing the openness and not being afraid of, I don't know that much about Acumatica yet. Sounds like you're already well on your way to becoming an Acumatica guru. And thanks for coming on so early in your journey, and love to have you back on in a few months, or maybe even on the live broadcast to check in, see how things are going.
That's great. And thanks. I appreciate it.
Any other last things that we didn't get to that you wanted to mention?
No, I think we've covered everything. Thank you very much.
I'll let you get back to your evening there in Ireland, and talk to you in the future.
Thanks a lot.
All right. Well, that's it for now. We'll catch you on the next episode of AUGforums.com Real Talk. Thanks for listening and take care. Real Talk. Thanks for listening and take care. Take care.